Myles Garrett requests a trade from the Cleveland Browns, but will they accommodate him? We'll talk about that here today on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It is your team every day here on Locked On NFL. We thank you for making us your first listen, reminding you that wherever you get your podcasts, whether you listen to them or you watch them, make sure you tap into that location each and every day so you do not miss an episode of The Big Show. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. Today's guest, as always, on a Monday is Julian Council from Locked On Panthers. As you can see, his header, if you're watching, it's at Julian Council on X. There you go. Here's what we're going to talk about today. Biggest turnaround. Which two teams or a couple of teams will make a huge, huge turnaround this year? We're going to focus on the Super Bowl, Eagles and Chiefs, health for the Super Bowl. One team's healthy, one team isn't, and it's not the team that was unhealthy all year. But we're going to start at the very, very top with news that just broke right prior to us recording this show. In fact, a little bit behind the veil, we were about to talk about something else, and then that happened. And Julian Council, being who he is, said, "Oh, hit the brakes. We got to do these graphics all over." One of the best players in the league, in my opinion, the top defensive player in the National Football League, Myles Garrett, has requested to be traded from the Cleveland Browns. Now, you broke this for me, Julian. You got a little bit of a backdrop, too, from what the GM has said about Myles Garrett. Go ahead and break this all down for us and give us your spill on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. And how often do we see a guy ask for a trade and also come out with a statement? I do think the statement is important when talking about this. He said, as a kid of dreaming of the NFL, all I focused on was my ultimate goal, winning a Super Bowl. And that goal fuels me today and more than ever. And he said, while I love calling the city home, my desire to win and compete on the biggest stages won't allow me to be complacent. The goal was never to go from Cleveland to Canton. It has always been to compete for a Super Bowl. With that in mind, I've requested to be traded from the Cleveland Browns. So that's where we have to start the conversation when it comes to what teams is Myles Garrett likely going to go to. It's going to be teams that actually are legitimate Super Bowl contenders, meaning teams that have a quarterback, unlike the Cleveland Browns. And Andrew Berry, who is the GM there in Cleveland, did come out and say this past weekend at the Senior Bowl that Myles Garrett was not going to be traded, that they were not going to entertain trade requests. Now, that was before Myles Garrett said, trade me. And now this is going to change things. I'm sure plenty of teams are going to want to get, as you believe, as the best pass rusher in the NFL.
No doubt about it. So the first thing that I decided to do was look at the teams that are better than their record suggests, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's going to take this, especially with this Luka Doncic thing that happened this weekend. And I know he's a big superstar, but everybody acting like they got chopped liver for him. And I'm gonna tell you something, Anthony Davis is not chopped liver, but it's going to take something monumental to get him. And the team that gets him, they also have to fit him into their salary cap situation. So could it be one of those teams playing? Could you see Myles Garrett in Philadelphia? That's one thing. And what could they possibly give? What could they give him? I mean, they're picking late in the draft. They would have to. I mean, if I'm sitting there thinking like they got to send me one of those offensive linemen, one of those young offensive linemen, if I'm Cleveland, maybe even a wide receiver. Like I'd ask for Devontae Smith, and I'd probably ask for one of those other big-time offensive linemen they have, whether it be Cam Jurgens or whoever. There's a lot that you can do. I think the only player like for Philly that would be off the table would be Jalen Carter, and of course the quarterback. And then I look at San Francisco. They're another team that we all believe is better than their record suggests. Maybe the Bears, maybe Chicago at pick 10 with their new coach, and we'll talk about them and discuss them later. But there's a little bit of a quandary here. I don't know what the dead cap space is for Cleveland because I know they did pay Myles Garrett some money, and teams don't like doing that. But as far as Garrett is concerned, I don't blame him. This whole Deshaun Watson thing really, really screwed that organization up and set them back. And I don't see a path moving forward where he's going to be able to do anything of significance for his career goals, which is the championship. I don't see Cleveland, but they're in the best division in football. They ain't going to push for no title in the next 5 years, not in my opinion.
No, absolutely not. Not when you have Lamar, who may be at the end of this week a 3-time MVP, Joe Burrow, who's pretty much the only quarterback. He is the only quarterback other than Tom Brady who's been able to take Patrick Mahomes down in the playoffs thus far, and then also Pittsburgh. So like they don't have a quarterback, but the Steelers, as we know, are never bad with Mike Tomlin. And I mean, a lot of good thoughts there from you. Looking at overthecap.com, the Browns are currently $30 million over the salary cap, which is just, how is that possible to be the second worst team in the league, go 3-14 and have that bad of a cap situation? Oh, why is it that bad? Because Deshaun Watson has a $72 million cap hit. That is just absurd. Myles Garrett's cap hit's only $19 million, so that's not terrible. And the Browns would save, actually, looks like they actually wouldn't save any money if they traded him, so I don't know what they're going to do there. That's a bad situation. But Adam Schefter actually put this out there, comping when Khalil Mack got traded from Oakland, then the Oakland Raiders, to the Chicago Bears. The Bears had to give up 2 first-round picks, a 3rd-rounder, and a 6th-rounder for Mack, a 2nd-round pick, and a conditional 5th-round pick. So a lot.
All right, so listen to this now. So I just found the team, the Washington Commanders, and I'll tell you why. Because they need a pass rush, right?
Mm-hmm.
They just made the playoffs. They have Jaden Daniels. Here's what you could do if you're, and this is going to be rough now. All right. Daron Payne, as well as Jonathan Allen. There's talk, you can't have 2 defensive tackles making 90 million. Well, Washington does, right? So yeah. I think you look at that, and then you look at can I say you look at Scary Terry? I mean, you're asking for Myles Garrett, and your pick is one of the last 4 picks in the draft. You got to give me some players, and you got to give me a whole bunch of picks. It's gonna take a really, really creative team, a team that's already winning. The Vikings have $58 million under the cap, but what can they give away? An injured Christian Darrisaw? So it's very, very difficult for me to try to sit here right now as we speak and sort of make sure that he gets what he wants. Mm-hmm. But then to make sure the compensation that comes back to Cleveland absolutely makes sense for them.
I think for the Browns, I don't know necessarily if you need to get any players in this trade. Like, think about when they traded all those assets for Deshaun Watson, and Houston used all of that to get players to put around now their quarterback, CJ Stroud. Look at Chicago when they fleeced Carolina, and Carolina want to go up there and get Bryce Young. They got 5 guys so far out of that who were able to contribute this past season. Tyreek Stevenson, who cost him in that game against Washington, that Hail Mary, was one of them as well. But still, like, the fact that you can get more players, like young guys, and Cleveland's not in a win now situation. They're probably going to find a way to bring in a quarterback this offseason. Deshaun having that setback by re-tearing his Achilles. He's probably not going to be their starter for the majority of next season, if not the entirety of 2025. So I think they should be focused on just being able to get a bunch of picks to be able to build this thing for the long term, more so than can we get a guy who can come in and help them right away. And that obviously is going to limit which teams want to go out there and do it. But there's going to be teams that are going to want to just be in win now mode. And I think also, you know, like the Bears, not the Bears, but the Lions and the Rams made that trade with Stafford and Goff and
Buffalo, right?
Yeah,
right.
But like there's teams that have given up a lot, and it's worked out for them in the past. But you've seen that most times when you do give up those 3 first-round picks, those 2 first-round picks, it typically does not pan out for you. And the Bears, like Khalil Mack was good, but what did Chicago do with him? Nothing.
Right. So that's why I think the quandary here is he wants to go to a contender, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, unless he has some kind of clause where he can say where he can and can't go. I don't even know if they do that in the NFL that much. But the thing is if he wants to go to a contender, well, a contender's picks are going to be super, super low. So the return you're going to get on those picks won't be the same as Chicago. Mm-hmm. And the return you're going to be, you know, you just won't get as high of a return if you trade him to a ready-made contender, which is why I was looking for those teams whose record is worse than their team really is. That's why I brought
San
up
Francisco. Yeah,
like San Francisco. That's why I brought that up, because or those teams that have young players that have played early that still have 2 or 3 years under contract. That's why those teams are going to be premium in this discussion, man. But Monday morning, man. What is the trade winds are happening all across sports, man, brother. People just want to move. They just want to move, and guys are prioritizing winning because people want to be where the Eagles and the Chiefs are. We're going to talk about it. There's a big game coming up this week. We're going to get to that in just a second here on the Monday edition, talking about the health of both of these teams that are competing for a Super Bowl. We'll do it in just a second on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by LinkedIn Talent Solutions. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means it's time to hire. You need a partner that works just as hard as you when that time comes up. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. Post your job at LinkedIn's new feature. It can help you write your job descriptions and quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Julian Council and I are moving on here at the barbershop on Locked On NFL. It's game week, Super Bowl game week, and one of the things that is very, very prevalent is worrying about who's healthy and who's not. We don't need any excuses. We don't have any bad weather. There's no snow flurries. This game is indoors in New Orleans, and people have already made the trek down there. So all we got to do is worry. Well, you might have to worry about the officials too, according to a lot of people since the Chiefs are playing. Yeah, right. But here's one thing. The Chiefs have spent most of the year unhealthy. They're healthy now with the exception, of course, their number one wide receiver, Rashee Rice. But the Chiefs folks think that the walking wounded, the Eagles. Listen to this from Locked On Chiefs.
The Philadelphia Eagles. I don't even know if I can fit. If I tried to put it on screen, I don't know that I'd be able to fit the Eagles injury list today.
No, you wouldn't. It's huge. And it is ridiculous how many people are on the injury list. Now, don't get me wrong. They've got three people on there that have just rest related. Although I guess there's one on there that has rest/ankle. So he's got a little bit of an injury. And another one with illness, so you would figure that he's probably going to be okay. It's just, sick for the day type thing. But that's a lot of do not practices. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 did not practice for the Philadelphia Eagles on Thursday.
Them boys ain't got nothing else to do but be looking at other people's charts saying they're not healthy. The biggest two that I'm concerned with Philly, because Nakobe Dean isn't going to play, it's the center, Cam Jurgens, who rested for the title game, and Landon Dickerson, who played center for Jurgens at left guard. The Eagles decided advantage, and I don't even know if it's an advantage with the Chiefs, but if you want to give them a decided advantage, their offensive line and their running game versus anybody is always going to be an advantage. I think with Chris Jones lined up in the middle of that defense, they're going to need to be upright and healthy.
Yeah, I mean, they're bringing up guys who didn't practice on Thursday, January 30th. The game is on Sunday, February 9th. So I'm not super concerned about the guys that didn't practice. Because you look at it, because I'm looking at it right now. I mean, Saquon didn't practice at all last week. Why? Because he was resting. Zach Bond had a groin injury, didn't practice on Friday. Is that really something that's holding him back? Or are they just resting Zach Bond and then they have to put it up there because of league rules? I'm not super concerned about that. Like the Jurgens thing, obviously, because he didn't play. Landon Dickerson, he was somebody that was really hobbling in that NFC title game and did not come out until the very end. Obviously, that's concerning, but they didn't play yesterday. They play next Sunday. They're still 6 days away from the game. So I understand all of that. Now, the one thing that stood out to me, honestly, was the fact that Brandon Graham was limited at practice the final couple of days last week. And he's somebody that has obviously been a leader for over a decade there in Philly. And it sucked to see him go out with that elbow injury that he's going to be out for the season. Now, it's a possibility that he plays on Sunday. And that is just a huge gain for Philadelphia to be able to have another edge rusher against the Kansas City Chiefs offensive line, where obviously we've known if you're going to beat Mahomes in the Super Bowl, you have to get after him. And that's what a couple of years ago Tampa Bay did when When Kansas City had no tackles, they were starting Mike Rimmers in that game. If Philadelphia can find an advantage with that, like that's what you're looking at. But yeah, they had a ton of guys on there because it's been a grueling season. And also they're resting most of these dudes. It's not as serious as it looks.
Yeah, it's not as serious as it looks. You know why? Because there's only one game left. There's no reason to rest Cam Jurgens for anything anymore. So guess what? If you can go, you go until you can't. And everybody's going to lay it on the line. Everybody, including veteran Brandon Graham. If y'all don't remember, in 2017, you know who got the sack at the end of the game and a forced fumble to cause Tom Brady to fumble? Brandon Graham. And you know what? You don't have to play well all game. What is it? The late, great Toby Keith, didn't he say something like, I don't have to be as good as I once was, but I just got to be as good once as I ever was, or something like that, right?
Yeah,
Cowboy Carter wins the award, and now you got Cowboy Wig on here quoting country, right? But here's my man Lou DiBiase for the Eagles. And unlike the Chiefs, he ain't talking about them. He's talking about his own team. Check this out.
What a story. Brandon Graham. We thought his career in Philly was over. Year 15. Nobody has played more games as an Eagle in franchise history. Was having a really good year. The game that he tore his bicep in November, Sunday Night Football against the Los Angeles Rams, one of the best games of his career, in my opinion. Like, he dominated that football game. He took over and had Matt Stafford running for his life. And it was so sad to see him tear that bicep in the press conference after. He's like, I'm done. And even the media thought he was joking because, you know, BG and his personality, he's always kidding around. Nope, he was done, and we thought that might be a career. And that was sad because we knew the Eagles at that point were a Super Bowl contender, and, you know, he wouldn't be able to go out on top and play in the game. However, he did return to practice this week. He's practiced 2 days in a row. He's a full go. He has the cast on the brace on his arm, the Ray Lewis, if you will, and he's going to try to give this thing a go next week. And it's an unbelievable story. Again, this is a player that's, 35, 36 years old now, year 15, a torn bicep that's not fully healed. He's not 100%. He's a defensive lineman, so he's going to need that arm. The fact that he has made the recovery fast enough to potentially play in this game, and potentially the last game of his career, again, one of the greatest Eagles ever, to get his second ring, to have his career end with confetti falling on him. I mean, it's something that Hollywood writes a script about. So it would be such a cool story.
While Louis was talking, I had dreams and nightmares playing in my headset, man, and I'm sitting there thinking, this is setting up now. My buddy Marlon, I'm going to D.C. and I'll be there for the game. He's from Philadelphia. In fact, I have to mention his neighborhood. He's from Germantown. He says, no, you got to say that if you ever say I'm from Philly. He is basking at the fact that usually people hate the Eagles. They hate their fans. They call them obnoxious. Well, everybody in the league that is not an Eagles or a Chiefs fan is rooting for Philadelphia because they're sick of the Chiefs. And he said, man, we'll take it. And I think that's very ironic for this game. How do you think this thing is going to play out with them being healthy?
Yeah, look, I love the Brandon Graham story, and like Louis getting me kind of fired up, man. It's like they're gonna put I'm ready to run up there, do the whole Rocky. Like they might have to build this man a statue if he does actually be. Because I think he's gonna play. Like it makes no sense not to let him play. This is his last football game of his career. He's 36 damn years old. Let the man play. If he's got one arm, so be it. Rotate him in and out of there. Don't have him in there on obvious rundowns. Like clearly, just give him a couple snaps. Let him go out there and do what he can do and lay his body on the line one last time. If he feels like he can do it, let him do it. So I think it's awesome that he's able to play. Like I know there's conversations whether the Lions, if they got to this point, if Aiden Hutchinson could play. Like that's a good thing about the Super Bowl and the season being so dang long is guys that you thought were lost for a season can come back. So I hope he plays. I hope he gives it a shot. And I mean, that would be one hell of a story if Brandon Graham, as he said, one of the greatest Eagles of all time, comes out there, beats the team that 2 years ago set them back. And I think a couple of years ago, there's conversation whether he was going to retire after the Super Bowl loss back there in Arizona. So certainly this is probably it for him down in New Orleans. And I hope it happens. I hope that everybody who is borderline can play and they give it a shot, especially a guy like Brandon Graham, where this is it. I mean, it's not like there's literally no tomorrow for Brandon Graham. His football career.
Ain't no tomorrow, man. And I'm gonna tell you, the barbershop is something else. In one segment, we made a Beyonce, Toby Keith, and Meek Mill's reference. That's what you get, man. It's like a buffet of stuff around here. All right, so we got a buffet in the segment number 3. who can turn their season around? I mean, who's like really, really bad and really, really underachieved? There's a familiar name that I want to bring up, a familiar team. Y'all have Chiefs fatigue, but not too long ago, the whole world had Patriots fatigue. Well, if things go the way Mike Vrabel wants them to go, you're going to get it real soon again, because I think they have a chance to be really, really good. I'll talk more about that in just a second here in the third and final segment on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored in part and brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. This week, I'm looking at the board, man, and I'm selecting more for Travis Kelce on receiving yards and less for quarterback passing yards for Jalen Hurts. That's all you got to do, is more or less yourself into some money on Prize Picks. Check out the promos tab to tail any of the Super Bowl Millie winners, big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Download the app today and use the code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's the code Locked On NFL, which I'll spell for you, LOCKEDON NFL, for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. And today's show is brought to you and sponsored by Game Time. If you're looking for tickets to your next big event, maybe last-minute tickets to the big game this weekend, whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sports game, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a real headache. But with Game Time Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Game Time Picks, the app does all the work for you. It curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. That's right. If you're ready to make your next event even better, take the guesswork out of buying tickets and download the Game Time app. Create an account and use the code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Once again, for any event, football, big game, comedy shows, parties surrounding the big game, whatever, make sure you go to Game Time. Now, terms apply. Again, that's the code Locked On NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, third segment here on Locked On NFL. Just to top the show off real quick. Myles Garrett requested a trade. We talked about the teams that he could possibly go to and how it's about, if the league is this big, it's about this many people that fit the criteria that he wants that can actually give Cleveland what they want, and they're going to demand a lot for what I believe is the best defensive player, with all due respect to TJ Watt, the best defensive player in the National Football League. Now we're going to talk about some teams that hope to one day be in the conversation that the Chiefs and the Eagles are in. I was just sitting there thinking and pondering who could make a big turn. Doesn't mean that, and every year we have teams like Washington that go from one of the worst to one of the best. I'm not even talking about that much. Who can actually make the biggest turn and the biggest change for their franchise? I think about the Patriots right off the top of my head, and the reason why is because everybody likes their quarterback. Most people believe they really, really did make an upgraded coach, and I'm going to let Mike debate here tell you, and his guests tell you why on Locked On Patriots.
After another 4-13 season, Tanya, you knew that Patriots Nation was going to be clamoring for some sort of change. I think, to more bluntly put it, and maybe more accurately put it, this fan base wants more wins. There's no other way to sugarcoat that. And from the large number of fans that I've spoken to here in Patriots Nation, especially over the past month, they're optimistic that Mike Vrabel is the guy that can deliver what they want. You have your finger on the pulse of the national NFL takes. So given your work with FS1, how do you view the hiring of Mike Vrabel with the New England Patriots, and how is it being viewed from a national lens?
It's generally, personally, I think it's a good hire. I think that when you have somebody like Vrabel with head coaching experience, who was a good, successful head coach, a playoff head coach, who has these kinds of ties to your organization, it's kind of a home run. And most people, I feel like, because it seemed so obvious, most people, even from the national angle, were like, yeah, okay, Vrabel's going to New England. It always felt like Vrabel was going to New England. It felt like originally Vrabel probably should have just gone to New England. And he is viewed favorably, if only because he is a fit for New England specifically, because he does have that same sort of very similar mentality to the Patriots that we are recognized from the dynasty. There,
$120 million in cap space, a top 3 pick again in the draft, a coach that has a clear, defined way he likes to get things done. And I've looked at it, some free agents that really, really match up with what he wants to do. I'm not telling you they're going to the playoffs, but I do think the Patriots that you see on the field next year are going to be night and day to the team you saw this year.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm not completely sold there. I do think Drake May is going to be a stud. Obviously biased there, but I think Drake's gonna be good. It's kind of crazy that he was a Pro Bowler. I don't really understand how that was possible, but they got the right quarterback there. And obviously Rabes is an outstanding coach. I was in Tennessee when he was first hired and had a lot of connections still down there in Tennessee when everything fell apart last year, kind of lost a power struggle. And you look at it now a year later, looks like the Titans made the wrong decision as far as going to Rand Carthon as a GM and the guy who's going to handle everything personnel-wise, that maybe Amy Adams Strunk, the owner, should have listened to Mike Vrabel. But things not work out there. I think Robert Kraft is going to listen to him. And the fact that Robert Kraft doesn't have that much time. As an older guy, we don't know how much longer he's going to be able to watch the Patriots to go out there and potentially win. And he didn't really want to sit here and wait to see whether Gerard Mayo was going to pay off. And I guess he didn't see enough to believe. But Mike Vrabel was the best coach out there on the market this past cycle. And with Drake and Christian Gonzalez on the other side, they have a nice foundation. But man, spend $120 million in free agency. That's not I'm not saying they're going to do that, but that's not how you win in this league. You win by drafting, developing, and then filling the right holes via free agency. And I don't look at it as a situation that's going to turn around that quickly, especially when Buffalo, they're not going anywhere. Miami, they're still going to be fine. We'll see what the Jets do. But I do think that obviously that I do think they'll be better. They're not going to be sitting there drafting the top 3 again. I just don't see I'm not saying you're saying this, a turnaround from being one of the worst teams to being a playoff team in year 1, just because Vrabel's the coach now.
Yeah, that's a very, very difficult thing to do. It's extremely difficult. Another difficult thing to do is when you're that hot little play caller, when you get to your new stop and you have to actually do all of the things that your former coach did, like fill out his staff. A lot of people were talking about the Lions saying, oh, they're going to fall apart. And I say, well, you have evidence that Dan Campbell knows how to build a staff. So doesn't mean he's going to do it again, but at least you saw him do it once. He could probably do it again. Now Ben Johnson has to fill out his staff in Chicago, and it's about more than calling plays. And I know that from here in Jacksonville with the same type of situation. Here's what Lauren Cox has had to say about Ben Johnson filling out his staff.
Ben Johnson deserves plenty of praise for the coaching staff he's putting together for the Chicago Bears. But that doesn't mean we can't still have some questions about how this staff is coming together and how it will translate for the players. There's a lesson to be learned here from how, and some of the mistakes from how Matt Eberflus assembled his coaching staff for now things we need to watch out for with Ben Johnson's coaching staff. And so hopefully we'll get to know some of these names a little bit better and get a better sense of who's going to be coaching your Chicago Bears this upcoming season. The big lingering positions to fill as I'm recording this podcast are offensive line and defensive line coach. Those are the biggest vacancies, plus linebackers coach is also vacant at the time of this recording. But up close and personal in the trenches are going to be 2 really significant hires for Ben Johnson. I think offensive line coach might be the next biggest hire after offensive coordinator, really, when it comes to this offense being able to live up to its full potential, right? We've talked about how Ben Johnson's Detroit Lions teams have had really consistently good offensive line play.
So I always say the most pressing need doesn't have to be what you address first. There are a lot of people say, well, before you do anything, you need to do that. No, it could be your priority. But a lot of these teams, including Jacksonville, they haven't gotten their offensive line coach because it might be somebody who's still coaching. And it's such a critical, Nick Saban has said that building the offensive line is the most important thing. Now, on the flip side, Urban Meyer said building a defensive line is the most important thing. But this is what I always said, man. Just because a guy called plays doesn't mean that he can automatically be a head coach.
Yeah, I'm actually leaning with Urban Meyer on that. I think D-lines win. That's kind of my axiom when it comes to football, especially at the level below us in college. Like, if you got to have D-lines. Like, those guys are just different kind of athletes. Offensive line is obviously important, but I've seen plenty of good offensive lines get their ass kicked by just these special talents defensively. But yeah, I mean, the thing too, like, okay, who's going to be the offensive line coach? Well, who's going to be the players is way more important, I think, in my opinion. Look at who Detroit has on their offensive line. Taylor Decker, Graham Glasgow, Frank Ragnow, Kevin Zeitler, Penei Sewell. None of those guys are going to be in Chicago. So that's really the main concern. You got to build out the actual roster. Who coaches them is important, yes. But you can only do certain things. Like what you saw with Ben Johnson, like, he's not going to be able to do the kind of Statue of Liberty, hook and ladder type plays with Penei Sewell because they don't have an athlete like that playing right tackle in Chicago. So yeah, it's important. And we're already seeing with Jacksonville, Liam Cohen did not leave Tampa in the right way, not allowing him to talk to people there. And Detroit, I haven't really seen necessarily where that's happening, but a lot of guys can't make those lateral moves, and contracts have to be honored at the NFL level. Sometimes they allow people to leave, but that's not the norm in this league. So we'll see what Ben Johnson does. But you're right. It's more than just calling plays. Can you assemble a staff? Can you be able to handle personalities and multitask and be more of a CEO? Like, coaching is still part of your job, but it's not the job anymore.
Yep, you're right. But it's all for one reason, and it's all for one thing. Teams ultimately want to get to where the Chiefs and the Eagles are this week. So we're going to have more coverage for that. Check in on Locked On NFL all week, a double dose with Tyler Rowland early in the morning and then slide back through the barbershop. We're going to navigate you all week through all of these things and the big game. So I know Tyler and them, they're going to talk about possible areas and go into more depth about where Myles Garrett could go, not Myles Jack. And yeah, Myles Jack wasn't down. That's what Jaguar fans has been saying since 2017. But I'll tell you this. It's going to be a topic for conversation. I think it's even going to hit Radio Row this week, as everybody's been talking about Missoula. Missoula says, I ain't talking about no trade because I don't care. The Boston Celtics coach, maybe some people have to say that this week on the podium when we get to Media Day in New Orleans. But Julian Council is going to scat and go get busy like he always is. And I'll see you here tomorrow on Locked On NFL with Kevin Oestreicher. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.